Hello everyone and welcome back to Fly From Home. It's Internet Cat here again with some more Microsoft Flight Simulator gameplay. Now, first of all, before we get underway, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to everybody for 2,000 subscribers. We're still obviously a very, very small channel on YouTube, and 2K is a really big mark for us, so thank you so much for everybody who smashed that subscribe button to pieces over the last few months. It's been quite a good year for us as a whole. So yeah, thank you very much. So I thought I would do a little bit of a flight to celebrate this. Now it's not going to be a review flight or anything new that you've not seen on this channel, because we're back in one of my favourite twin-engine aeroplanes for Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's this Piper Seneca V by Carenado. Now, as you can see, it's a very lovely looking aeroplane, and if you've watched my review of it on this channel, you'll know that I am... Shut up, Discord. I am... Okay, shut up, Discord. Yes, okay, so you'll know that if you've watched my review of it on this channel, that I'm quite a big fan of it. It's still got some issues with single engine handling, but for the most part, as long as you keep it on 2 engines, it is a quite accurate representation of the real aeroplane in handling and performance. So we're going to be doing a flight outside of controlled airspace from our usual starting point here in Doncaster, which, as you can see, is looking pretty minging today, all the way down to Gloucester in, would you believe it, Gloucestershire. It's going to be an IFR flight outside of controlled airspace, which is something that I do quite commonly for my company that I work for, because a lot of the time low altitude airways aren't really the best route possible. If you're ferrying an aircraft, you want to do it as direct as possible, and air traffic services in the UK are usually okay with you using RNAV routing outside controlled airspace, flying IFR, giving you a traffic service. So that's what we're going to try to simulate in Microsoft Flight Sim today. As you might have guessed, I've got real world weather on, because obviously the weather's looking pretty rubbish, which it always does in the UK. I've got real world weather, real world time, and we're going to try and take it on in this aeroplane. We should be okay. We've got de-icing on the aircraft and all that kind of stuff, so all the equipment we need is here. In terms of planning the flight, I've not done a sim brief plan or anything like that. I've had a quick look at the Form 215, which is the Met form which we use for prevailing weather conditions in the UK. As you might guess, it's pretty horrible, but freezing level is going to be down at sort of 2,000–3,000 feet, so we are going to be probably encountering icing conditions. But like I said, we are equipped to deal with that sort of thing. In terms of checklists and things, I am using a checklist that I found on the internet, which is presumably a real-world Seneca V checklist. So I'm going to be going through that and using that as we set the airplane up. Okay, so first things first, let's go to our checklist and start going through. Okay, so let's assume that we've done our all our pre-flight external inspections on the aircraft, and now we've planned our flight. All the doors and hatches are closed, chocks are removed, and external bits and pieces have been taken off, pitot covers and static covers and all that kind of stuff removed before flight. Right, so the first thing we've got to do is whack the alternators on. So if I remember rightly, they are up at the top here. There we go, left and right alternators. Pop those on. Parking brake is set. Gear selector, we'll check, is in the down position there. Throttles are set to idle. Now, something that I've got since my last video on the channel, I now have a honeycomb Bravo throttle, so look at that, I've got 2 separate throttle levers. I also have 2 separate prop pitch and 2 separate mixtures, so I've got this all set up to simulate a piston twin in its entirety, and I'm going to get the full experience on this flight, so I'm looking forward to that. Throttles are set idle, prop controls full forward, mixtures are idle, cut-off, friction is fine. Alternate air doors are, I mean, I think they do operate, yeah, together on this airplane, but they are set closed. Cowl flaps, we'll make sure they are open for start. Stabilator and rudder trim, they should be neutral, and they are. Fuel selectors, so we're going to pop those into the on position. Like that. Heater in the aeroplane is off. Electrical master switch and radio master switch are both off. Circuit breakers are all in. Okay, so prop controls check full forwards. Master battery cone come on. There we go. the gyros running up. Check gear lights 3 green, which we have down there. Slightly hard to see. Fin strobe light, or otherwise known as beacon lights, on. So yeah, that is on. Throttle crack by 1 inch. Standby fuel pump. It's up here. There we go. They've made this a lot quieter since I did my review video. There's been quite a few patches out for this airplane. They've improved it quite a bit, so all good. Thumbs up. Mag switches on, so we'll whack the left engine magnetos on, and then we're going to prime it. So we're going to check our fuel flow for the left engine here. So we'll start left first, which is normal practice on a piston twin. Prime it for about sort of 5 seconds, then back to idle cutoff. And then we are going to go left engine at start with the button here. Now, they've still not enabled it, so you can start it as you would in real life, i.e. you hit the starter, you wait for it to fire, and then you throw the mixture forward. So what I'm going to have to do is a bit of a messed up version of that. So I'm going to have to hit the starter and crank it, and then throw the mixture in, and then it will start. Oil pressure immediately we check is in the green. RPM, bring the RPM down to 1200 for ground idle. And starter warning light is out. Okay, we've got a good start on that engine. Let's repeat the process with the other side. So we can pop the fuel pump up on the left now, pop the right one on. Mixture rich on this side, a bit of throttle, get a bit of fuel flow for the prime, then back to idle cutoff. Make sure the mags are on and hit the starter. And go forward on the mixture to get it to start, and there we go. And oil pressure is in the green, starter warning light is out, and RPM is 1200. Fuel pump can now come off on this side, if I can find it. There we go. Happy days. Okay. So, volts and amps, we can't check because this thing isn't on yet, so we'll check that in a sec. In fact, you know, let's put the avionics on so we can actually check that stuff. So volts and amps are all system normal, and vacuum is in the green. Fuel gauges are checked. We've got just above half tanks. I've put 2 in the front, 2 in the back in terms of our load for today. So we've got a moderate load. One of the kind of strange quirks about the Seneca V is that if you use full fuel, you can't actually take full passengers, full 6 seats, which is a little bit odd for a large and quite powerful twin-engine aeroplane like this, but it is what it is. Okay, next item. Got no external power connected, so that's fine. Throttles are set 1200 for ground idle, battery master switch and radio master switch both on. Yep, gyros are all run up. We will set our CDI, or HSI, for departure. So this is something I've now got on my Honeycomb Bravo. I'm now doing that with a little switch. So I've got an actual heading bug, which is really, really cool. And I can also use that to change the course deviation indicator like this. So I'm going to set it onto runway heading. I'm actually jumping the gun a little bit, so I should probably find out what the active runway is. Now, I could just tune the ATIS as I would in real life, but the text-to-speech ATIS is a bit annoying, so I'm going to get it on text, which is something you can do using the brilliant Garmin 750 here. So what we need to do is go to waypoint info, airports, and we'll go for E, G, C, N, enter, and weather. And the wind is 250 at 13, which means we're going to be using runway 20 with a reasonably significant crosswind. So let's spin it round to 200 or 198, which is the actual exact runway heading. And we'll do the same with the heading bug. It's really cool to be able to do this in real life. There we go. So that's all set up. The CDI is actually set to V-lock. So when we put the nav radius stuff in there, it will display on there. Next item is altimeter, so that's handy that we've got this up. We've got 902 hectopascals as our altimeter setting, so let's set that on here. down zoom. On that side, and then FO's altimeter over this side. The wrong way, am I? No. Just make sure I've actually got it properly, which I have. There we go, good. So altimeters are checks and set times 2, nav lights are already on, heater and defroster are not required right now, fuel selectors are on. Now we would check the crossfeed, so this is one of the weird things about the Seneca. To get it to crossfeed you have to put it through off, so I'm going to try and do this without turning the engines off. Have I saved it? Yes, just about. This is very weird. And we leave that for 15 seconds to make sure they are working. Heater unfortunately still doesn't, it's still sort of just for show in this aeroplane. It'd be nice to have a windscreen heater. So we're going to do this with a scroll wheel, might be a bit faster. There we go. Back to the on position. Okay, cool. Note to self, use the scroll wheel. Right, so crossfeeds are checked. And okay, let's put our route in. So let's go back. Go to flight plan. Wait for it to load in and set origin. And I'm going to put Doncaster in. Now in real life, what I suspect what would happen, this would auto-populate because obviously the system knows where it is when it's turned on, so it kind of automatically guesses that your destination is going, origin is going to be the nearest airport to wherever you turn it on at. And maybe that's a feature that you can bring in the future. Bravo Juliet is where we're going. We're going to Gloucester. En route waypoint, so this is a routing that I've used a couple times in the past for this exact flight, because I've done it a couple times in real life. So we're going to go Doncaster to the Echo Mike Echo, which is the East Midlands NDB. From there we're going to go to the Bravo Hotel X-Ray, which is the Birmingham overhead. It's the Birmingham NDB. And from there we're going to go direct track to Gloucester Airport. We're not going to be doing a standard instrument departure out of Doncaster, but we may be doing a standard arrival into Gloucester. I'll see what we've got available. I think it's possibly a DME arc or something like that, so that's going to be a barrel of laughs, I'm sure. Okay, so routes in. We're also going to set on nav radios. So comms, yeah, okay. So we would tune the comms at this point. So we'd have 128.775 on active, and on standby we'd have radar. Over here we'd probably have, in fact it's ident of those. That's fantastic, didn't even realise it could do that. Over here we're going to have 110.995, which is the ILS, and then standby, I don't know, maybe Gamston, 1128. Squawk code would probably been given squawk on our departure clearance that would have been probably picked up at this point. So I don't know. Let's put something like that in. Leave it on standby. Navcom 2. So I'd probably have ATIS in here for Doncaster. In the box for 2, I would probably put ILS again, just as a backup in case we lose. We lose the primary, and I guess we can put Gamston as a backup in there too. Autopilot, so we can check our autopilot now. So this is something we do in real life to make sure everything's working properly. So we have to swizz my heading bug round again. There we go. Now I've got an autopilot master switch on my throttles. So I'm going to see if that works. Does it work? Maybe not. Maybe I have to do it manually, so pop it over there. As you can see, you get a flight director bar there. And if we'll do it now, maybe not. There we go. So if we select heading and altitude hold. So what we do is we'd spin the heading bug, and we'd be checking the controls to make sure that they followed the heading bug. Unfortunately, doesn't seem to be happening, but we can overpower it, which is what you'd expect. So yeah, in real life, the controls would be sort of following the heading bug, and then we'd put it into vertical speed mode, and from there we'd sort of select a rate of climb, and the yokes would sort of come back towards you, and then you just check to see if you could overpower it and all that kind of stuff. But sadly, it doesn't seem like it does that in the simulator. We're just going to make sure we can pop that all back off again. Okay, and then we've got to reset the heading bug. These old style instruments are a bit of a pain to do this in, because you can just click in on the G1000 cockpit, which is what we use for work. Right, so that's all checked. Electric trim, so yeah, we'd check the trim switches and make sure they were working. Passenger briefing, let's assume passengers are all briefed. Transponders to stand by, and the code is set. Parking brake released, and then we're ready to taxi. So what we would do is we'd pop our taxi lights on. Obviously, let's assume we've got taxi clearance. Idle throttles, release the parking brake, and start rolling. So I'm just going to check the brakes quickly. A little bit of differential thrust to get around this corner, so that is on the outside engine. I'm just going to advance the throttle a little bit more, just to help us around the corner, which is something you often do with twin-engined aeroplanes of all sizes, not just moderately small ones like this. Okay, something that's very important for certainly an IFR flight, we need to be checking our instruments as we're taxiing. So as we come around this left-hand corner here, we're going to check all of our flight instruments and make sure they're behaving as they should do. So turning left number should decrease on both the compass and the HSI. Wing left, ball right on the turn coordinator, everything else stable, which it is, so we're happy with that. And obviously we see the other side is doing the same. If we had somebody sat in the right-hand seat who was qualified as a pilot, or at least had a bit of aviation knowledge, we'd probably ask them to check those instruments for us, or to help us out with checking the instruments as we were going around these corners, because it is obviously tricky to check two sets of instruments at once. Just brakes them a bit over the top. Coming right now, so the opposite's going to happen, so numbers increase, wing right, ball left. Okay, so we're just going to rock up here and spin around as into the wind as we can get. Always stop with your feet straight. And then set the parking brake back to 1200 RPM, then we're going to do our power checks. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is a feather check, so we're going to pick the RPM up to 1500. And then we're going to drag the prop back into the feather zone. I'm going to let it drop by a maximum of 500 RPM. Okay. So that's good. Now we're going to pick up to 1700 RPM. And now we're going to exercise the propellers, so I'm going to do it separately. Okay, I've picked up the throttle to 2000 RPM, so I'm going to check our propellers now. So left, cycle once, drop in RPM, should be a rise in manifold air pressure. Next, we're looking for any oil across the cowlings, which there isn't, and third, looking for a change in the oil pressure. As we cycle, there we go. And again, now with the right side, so we're looking for a decrease in RPM, rise in manifold air pressure. Be more of a rise in real life. Looking over this side again, looking for any oil over the cowling. Let it recover to 2000. Then we're looking for a change in oil pressure, which we've got indicates that the oil is being driven into the constant speed unit. Check the mags, so left engine first, drop of about 100 RPM, back to both, other mag, and again, drop of about 100 RPM, back onto both, right engine now, and yeah, about 100 RPM, and the other mag, about 100 RPM again. Okay, happy with that. Volts, showing a charge, and we can check that by popping the pitot heat on quickly. And there you go, you see the amps spiking up there as the load increases, and then back up again, it goes back down again. So it's all good, that's looking good. Not these panel lights, all out apart from the pitot heat one, which we have. Gyro suction, check within normal range. So vacuum, yeah, we're in the green range, so I'm assuming that that's good. Ice protection equipment, so I'm going to back off the throttles now, back down to 1200 RPM. So if we put our de-ice on, now in real life obviously you'd observe the boots inflating and deflating on both sides and make sure that they do that. And back off again, make sure they come down. Not something we've got in the simulator at the moment, hopefully maybe one day. Okay, doors are latched, seat backs are upright, seats adjusted, seat belts, harnesses, armrests. Yeah, mass battery switch check on, which we have. Alternators are on, standby fuel pumps are now going to come on both sides, left and right. Flight instruments are checked and set for departure. We're going to go over to purple needles for departure, but we've got the ILS set for backup just in case we need it, in case we have to come back to the airfield. Prop heat is required, windshield heat, so we don't need that. We're not taking off straight into IMC, but we may need it if we hit the cloud. I'm probably going to take off with the outside air temperature gauge on here. As you can see, we've only got 5 degrees, so very quickly we're going to be past the freezing level as we climb. Props full forward, mixtures full forwards, alternate airs are set off. Flaps set, which is not at all, air conditions off. Stabilizer and rudder trim both set. Yaw damper is in op. Fuel selectors are both set to on. Down there. Flight controls, so left hand down, left side up. Right hand down, right side up. Yeah, there we go. We can't quite see the aft, but we'll go full aft, full forward. And rudder we've already checked as we were taxiing, so happy with that. We actually got that fin strobe on. I think we have. Right. Parking brake released, and then we are ready to go. It's just our line-up checks to do. Idle throttle, release parking brake. Fair chunk of right throttle to get us rolling. Let's assume we have now had our takeoff clearance. So we're going to go altitude reporting on the altimeters. ATPL, so approach path, clear left, clear right. Transponder I've just turned on, try and stand the taxiway pitot heats. So that's a switch on my yoke now, so I'm going to pop that on. And lights. Let's sort these out in a second. So we're going to go over to strobes. Taxi can come back on, and where are the landing lights? Good question. Should be up here somewhere. Landing lights, of course. What an idiot. Right, let's get it on the centre line and let's get going. So one last check of the T's and B's, everything's green and happy, nothing on the caution warning panel. Start to increase power. We've got some crosswind from the right, so I'm going to controls over to the right a little bit. To throttle up, making sure we don't exceed maximum boost, 38 inches. And rotates. That's where we go. Pass the climb gear up. Just adjust those 500 feet, so we'll set our climb manifold setting. So that's going to be 32 inches and 2,500 RPM. Okay, climb power sets. It's a little bit bumpy up here. It's really cool to have a trim wheel on this throttle quadrant. It's very nice, much better than just using the switches on the yoke. Much easier to keep the heading bug updated as well when you've got a little wheel to do it. So past 1,000 feet now, we can turn our landing lights off, and left and right fuel pumps can come off. T's and P's are all still green. Attitude and trim are set for the climb. Probably get a hand over to radar at this point, so flip that, and away we go. Okay, as you can see, outside air temperature is now -1. We are outside of cloud, but if we do hit cloud, this outside air temperature, I'm immediately going to put the electric prop heaters and the windscreen heater on. The boots are de-icing, so we don't operate those as soon as we enter icing conditions. We wait until there's a layer of ice built up on the leading edge, and then we break it off using the boots. Let's assume we've been cleared all the way to our cruise altitude, so we're going up to flight level 100 today. So I'm going to set that on our primary altimeter, but I'm going to keep the QNH set on the backup. Quite tricky to read those subscales, especially if you're an idiot like me. Now, why do we set the QNH on the standby instrument or the backup instrument? Well, that's because it actually gives us an idea of how far we are above the ground, whereas standard will obviously only give us distance above an arbitrary pressure setting that we use above the transition altitude, which is of course 1013 hectopascals. So if we were to have some sort of emergency, we'd have a rough idea of how far above the actual ground we were. And as we're flying along, we can pick up the QNH from various different met stations en route and keep that up to date. One of the reasons I really like flying this airplane around in Microsoft Flight Sim is just how stable it is. It's such a lovely rock steady airplane. It feels really heavy on the controls as well. Carenado, I feel, have done a much better job modelling the handling characteristics of this airplane that they have with some of their other products, shall we say. Now, of course, I could set the autopilot and get that to fly at this point, but I'm quite happy hand flying. I'm just going to open the range out on moving that as well. We are leaving controlled airspace now, so we'll probably pick up either a traffic or a deconfliction service from Doncaster, and we'd also be checking in and changing our standby frequency to East Midlands, so that's 134,180, and expecting a handover to them at some point soon. Or so, we just need to be checking the T's and P's, making sure she's still happy, she's not overheating. It's all lovely. See the the manifold air pressure isn't going anywhere. It's still set at 32 inches. I'm not having to walk the throttles forward or anything as the air gets thinner because it's a turbocharged aircraft, so I don't need to do that. There's 10,000 feet, so I'm just going to gently drop the nose a little bit and allow it to start accelerating. Now there's various different power settings you can use. Carenado very kindly included a power setting table in the documentation of this aeroplane. In the route files, if you hunt around in there you'll find it. So, but we're going to, since we aren't paying for fuel, it's just virtual, we're going to use the fast cruise setting. So we're going to be using 30 inches of manifold pressure and 2500 RPM. Accelerated sufficiently. Honestly expected conditions up here to be a little bit worse, but it looks like we are actually above the majority of the clouds, so it's nice, I guess. So you have quite a lot of wind, but it's mostly a tailwind, which is great. As you can see, we're almost doing 180 knots over the ground, which is happy days. Right, so let's start thinking about whacking the autopilot on. So we're heading and altitudes, and then we'll pull the bow back 30 inches. Props 2500 RPM, and we are going to flip over here because we are going to reduce the fuel flows now. In fact, it's probably a good idea to get the cowl flaps closed first because that could affect temperatures a little bit. So we're going to do that first, and then we're going to slowly draw back the fuel flows, looking for turbine inlet temperature. 1650 is the max. So as you can see, we've got just below 1600 at the moment. Just bringing it back a little bit more. Always got to be very careful when you do this. It's usually a good idea to place your hand underneath the levers to guard them. Make sure you don't pull them back too far. The right one can just bring back a little bit more. Left one is pretty much spot on now. There we go. Happy days. Actually flick over to the fuel page, I think. Can we get a gallons per hour? I've got a fuel remaining, which is handy. Gallons per hour here. There we go, look, so we've got about 26 gallons per hour per side. So, about 52 gallons per hour. Which is pretty mad, really, given that the aeroplane that I'm used to flying is a DA-42, which is maybe not quite as fast, but very, very close. It certainly would be doing about 170 knots at this sort of altitude, and it does 12 gallons an hour. So, and that's both engines. That's not 12 a side. That's 12 total, and it runs on jet fuel. So the good old DA-42 is a very, very cheap aeroplane to run compared to one of these. But then again, it's only got 4 seats. It's quite a cramped cockpit in comparison. So the little periodic check that I always do, and I always sort of impress upon my students, is called FRIDA IMC. So FRIDA check, if you've done any kind of PPLGA flying, certainly in the UK, you'll be familiar with a FRIDA check. So FRIDA check is just fuel. So we can check our fuel amounts, check it against our plug, make sure we've got the right amount, and that they're mostly in balance with each other as well. Radios, so we've set our radios up. Let's assume, okay, we've had our hand over to East Mids, we'll talk to them now. Engine T's and P's, all in the green, nothing out of the ordinary, and we've got our settings correct. DI, so let's just make sure that that's, I mean, it is slaved, but we'll make sure we've got it in the right mode. We've got things tuned in. And altimeters 1013 on the primary, and then QNH on the backup. And we could, for example, pick up the East Midlands QNH to update that with. So we can go back and go to here and put Echo Golf November X-ray in. QNH 993. So change I1 there. Message there, inside airspace. Yeah, cool. Let's assume we have been cleared in. Now, of course, we can put the aircraft into nav mode, so let's see how it handles that. Now, the kind of training that I do, we don't usually use nav mode on the autopilot. It's not actually allowed on instrument rating skills tests in the UK. You can only use heading and altitude hold and vertical speed mode for climbs and descents. So we don't usually do this. But if it was ferrying an aeroplane to or from, I'd probably use nav mode just to give me something less to worry about. Plus, I'm lazy, so you know. Okay, so one thing about single pilot IR or IFR flying, you never want to be kind of sitting back and relaxing at any point. You always want to be thinking about, well, what can I do to plan something now that I don't have to do later in the flight. So something I could be doing now is thinking about my descent. So to do that, we've got to know how far we've got to descend to start the procedure at Gloucester. So we've got to know what the procedure at Gloucester is. Now, thankfully, this thing gives us charts as well. So, oh, maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's something I need to set up. But I've got the hang on, I've got this thing over here. So pop this up. Now we know the wind is kind of coming out the west today, so let's assume it's a westerly runway. Of course, we can confirm that by having a look at the weather. It's 270 at 12 knots, so it's obviously going to be runway 27 in use. So the choices we've got are an ILS, an RMP, an NDB, or a secondary radar approach. So those, in my mind, are out of the question. So it's up to these two. Let's do the ILS because it's always, well, it's usually the easiest one to do. Bring it up and have a look at it. So you actually start. We're going to do the full procedure. We're going to have to start from the holding pattern at 2,800 feet. But it says aircraft will normally be required to hold not lower than 4,000. So presumably we've got to come down to 4,000 into the hold. Then we can do what would probably be the alternative procedures. Anything to say on here? Maybe not. Okay, so you go around the hold basically. And then you'd go outbound on one of these. So you'd go outbound on this one here. Now, we are coming from the northeast basically. So we could try to do the DME arc into here. But I think it'll be interesting to do the hold and go outbound from that. So we'll give that a crack. So we've got to come down to 4,000 feet. So we've got 6,000 feet to lose. Our usual little rule of 3. So it's going to be 18 miles from the beacon that we're going to start coming down from. So it's the 331 Golf Sierra Tango. And we're going to have the nav radio set up to this to give us a DME. So 10995. And we can switch to that now as soon as it starts picking up. In fact, it's already picked it up. That's pretty impressive. Sierra Yankee, that's not actually the right one. Okay, no worries. We'll make sure it idents the correct thing. That's when we're picking it up. And 331 is on the NDB, so let's pick that up. Over here. Go. The ADF on this aeroplane. Oh, very helpful. Okay, so when that starts picking up, we'll grab an ident from that as well. Okay, so 18 miles. Let's give it a couple miles for us to sort of sort ourselves out and get down. So we'll go with 20 miles from the Golf Sierra Tango here. So I mean, Golf Sierra Tango is pretty much on Gloucester, so I won't actually put it in as a waypoint. We'll just leave it for now. So we've got 36 miles to go. Oh, sorry, we've got 57. So that's the big number is the distance from this waypoint to this waypoint. The small number is the total distance that's ticking down. So it's important to know which distance you're looking at with that. This is our DME, so when we start picking up the DME from the ILS, we're going to have it on here. So we can check our range inbound from that. We can go back to the moving map and enjoy the view out the window for a little bit. Okay, so we're approaching Birmingham's airspace now. I don't actually know the frequency for Birmingham by heart, but fear not, because the good old GPS has got you. So Birmingham in that. And there's a few different approach frequencies, but from what I remember, that one is the one that you usually use. Over. Let's assume we'll be talking to them. One of the downsides about flying twin-engine aeroplanes is the engine nacelles often block a lot of the view out the side, so they're not great for sightseeing. But they are obviously a lot better than single-engine aeroplanes most of the time for cruising around in. You've obviously got the security of two engines and the added performance that you generally get in a twin-engine aeroplane. For example, we're doing 170 knots over the ground now, which is pretty nippy for a piston-engine aeroplane. And I should probably be paying more attention to what my autopilot is doing. So obviously we're on a different leg now. So what we do is change the tracks on these. So our track is 222, so CDI to the track, heading bug to whatever we're heading at the moment. If you watched my video on multi-engine training in the DA62, the default Microsoft DA62, the DA62X mod installed, I was talking about how I'm not actually a multi-engine instructor. Well, that has now changed, so a few busy things have been happening in my real-life career. I'm now qualified as a multi-engine instructor. I'm also qualified as an instrument rating instructor as well, so I've got sort of most of the main qualifications, flight training qualifications that you can get in the UK for training commercial pilots, so quite happy with that. Still hoping to be returning to airline flying at some point, maybe next year or maybe longer than that, I'm not sure, but I'm certainly enjoying my time instructing right now. It's cool to be out and about the twin-engine aeroplanes flying IFR. It's very different from the sort of previous 4 years of instructing that I was doing, which was all VFR stuff, most of it PPL, some of it CPL. The IFR stuff is obviously much better. Stay away from all those little plebs in the microlights down at 2,000 feet. Disclaimer, I have nothing against microlights flying around at 2,000 feet. Okay, we are now right over the top of Birmingham International Airport. Down there. make another turn. Direct track now is 205, so spin the course bar. And spin the heading bug. So we're now on our final leg towards Gloucester. Now for our descent, I mean this is probably something I should have done when we were actually on the ground, but a little bit unfamiliar with this aeroplane, and it wasn't on the checklist, so not my fault as far as I'm concerned. Haha. So I'll get a standby, we'll just check the test, and then we'll put it on. I don't think you can actually tilt it, or can you? Oh, you can. Cool. So you can give it a little bit of down tilt. So the weather radar is going to be pretty handy as we start our descent, because we're going to have to come through this weather. So if there's anything particularly nasty in it, the weather radar should show it up. As you can see, it's all nice and clear at the moment. Not entirely sure what that noise was about, but hey ho, it's a lot quieter now. One of the cool features this aeroplane's got, it's actually got pulsing landing lights here. Now, for what I can tell, it's something you'd use in the daytime for scaring birds away, which is quite cool. I've never actually flown an aeroplane that's got that particular function. I actually had a interesting offer the other day to fly one of these in real life. Obviously, I jumped at the chance, but it hasn't quite happened yet. So we'll see. I'll certainly let you know if I do have a crack in one of these in real life. It's always been one of my goals to do that. It's one of my favourite GA aeroplanes of all. Not that I dislike the DA-42, I think that's fantastic too. But there's something, definitely something about a big avgas-powered gas guzzler like this. Properly old school. Nothing from the NDB yet, nothing from the DME. We've still got 28 miles to go, so that's fairly normal. Probably going to be picking anything up from those for a little while yet. Now, something that I've completely neglected to plan for here is our hold entry. It's probably worth having a think about. So if we pull up our Navigraph charts again. So the hold is actually this little thing down here, around the Gulf Sierra Tango. The hold axes are 090270, so the inbound is the 090, so that way. So given our current heading, looks like we're going to be 3060. Yeah, we're going to be just inside for a parallel join. So what a parallel join is, we've got to fly over the top of the beacon, so we're going to be coming down from this sort of angle. Then we fly parallel with the inbound leg. So we basically fly the wrong way up the inbound leg for a wind-corrected minute. So I'm going to slow the airplane down to 120 knots when we're getting towards the sort of terminal approach phase. And our wind-corrected minute is going to be a minute plus or minus how much headwind component or tailwind component that we're getting. After we've flown our wind-corrected minute, we may then make a right-hand turn, bear in mind it's left-hand hold, around to join back up with the inbound leg over the beacon and into the hold. Now I'll go once around the hold just to demonstrate the techniques that we use for that, and then I'll go outbound on the Cat A and B line here, which is going to be tracking 095 from the beacon until 8 DME. At 8 DME we make an inbound turn, hopefully pick up the localizer if we're somewhere in the right place, and then come down the approach. We've also got to descend from 2,800 feet in the hold, so we'll be descending from 4,000 to 2,800 as we're going around the hold. And then we will be coming down from 2,800 to 2,300 as we're coming down this leg here. So once we've made the inbound turn, 2,300, we've then got to make a further descent once we've completed that turn and picked up the localizer to 2,000 feet, and then at 5 DME, that's our top of drop, we'll start a descent down all the way onto the runway. Decision altitude is going to be 287 feet. Now, I'm not sure about the Seneca V in terms of position error correction, but for the DA-42 we put 50 feet on for position error correction. I'll just assume that that we'll put that on for this aircraft as well. So that's going to leave us about 340 feet for our decision altitude. So we'll decide at 340. Final approach course 264. So the great thing about these JEPO plates is that you've got a briefing strip at the top. So to brief yourself, you just read this stuff here. So 109.95, it's already tuned. 264's final approach course. 2000 at 5 is going to be the top of drop. DA we've already worked out is going to be 340. Airport elevation is 100 feet. Missed approach is going to be on track 264 to 1000 or to DME, whichever is later, and then it's a right turn back into the hold at 2,800. Sector safety from where we're coming from is going to be 2,400 feet. Okay, any questions? I'm assuming no. How far we got to go? 15 miles, oh crap, I was talking for ages. So let's start our descent now. We'll go to vertical speed mode. Turn that to there, and hang on, maybe not. Have to come down a bit quicker than I normally would. Push the mixtures full forward now. The altitude compensation should prevent them from ridge cutting. We'll start our descent. I'm going to switch this back to outside air temperature. As you can see, it's minus 13. So if we go into any of these clouds, we're going to need to pop the props and the windscreen on. Okay, so at our current sort of rate of descent, might be a little bit insufficient. So I'm just going to pick it up to 1,200 feet a minute. Try not to back the throttles off enough to give us that annoying noise. I'm going to change the course bar over to the inbound leg of the hold, 090. So there we go. Are we getting? There we go. So we're getting that now. So on our audio panel, we can listen to that. Is it going to do it? Who knows? Let's see if the DME does it. We are going to have to audio out in the DME because it doesn't have its own little ident on here. It is reading now 8 miles. Obviously, while we're doing all that, we've got to monitor the descent fairly closely. The autopilot over into heading mode now. We're going to stop following the GPS course and we're just going to start following our ADF needle down here. So a bit of cloud in front, -7, so we'll be ready to on the anti-icing measures. 6,000 feet, 2 to go, 5 miles to run. Should be good. Get the charts up there for reference. So we can actually put ourselves on. There we are, look. Quite a significant amount of wind from the right here, which is going to be a barrel of laughs. Okay, just past 1,000 to go. I don't know how much needle dip there is going to be on this instrument, but I'd imagine about probably 10 degrees or so. basically the wind is now sort of shoving us around away from the beacon. I'm having to put wind correction in. Let's watch out for that. Back to altitude holes. Pull the props back to 2200 now. Help with the noise signature of the aircraft. There's 120 knots. Put up to about 22 or so inches. See how that goes. We are sort of just about to pass the beacon any second now. Okay, stopwatch start now. Just using the stopwatch on my phone. And given we've got about 50 knots pretty much straight ahead of us, we're going to have to wind correct for quite a lot of headwind. I'm just going to assume that we've got about 40 knots of that as a headwind component. Just trying to pull the tail of the needle around now. Bear in mind that this is not a relative bearing indicator. Sorry, this is a relative bearing indicator, not a relative magnetic indicator. So I'm just basically trying to get that to the same angle as that. So this compass card doesn't rotate with the airplane. It's just manual. So how far should we go? Probably at least another 20 seconds. Look at our ground speed, we're actually doing 80 knots. So with yeah, 40 knots with the headwind was a pretty damn good guess. So we'll go on a minimum 40, which is coming up in 5 seconds time. There's a minute and 40, start the turn. So we're turning against the direction of the holes. All the way around, hopefully onto to pick up the inbounds. Let's see how Mr. Autopilot does. I'm going to pick up a fairly gentle intercept angle because the wind is going to be blowing us quite severely towards the inbound leg, so we're not going to have to do too much. Not sure if you can use that as a stopwatch, but if you can, I don't know how. And we're pretty much almost on it already. So I'm just going to turn to still wind now. Wind should blow us the rest of the way. Speed's a little low. Pick the power up about an inch. Okay, needle's going. So that's pretty much bang on 3 minutes. So happy with the timings there. Let's start our turn. So at this point we'd have already, we've actually not changed onto Gloucester approach. That's my mistake. We'll do that in a second. Obviously in real life we'd have been prompted by Birmingham to do that. So we're going to go on to a triple drift corrected heading of about sort of there. So why do we need to use 3 times the drift on the outbound leg? Well, that's because we need to adjust not just for the actual leg itself, but also for the turns at either end. So we use 3 times the drift, and as soon as we hit the abeam point, which is there, we reset the timer, and we're going to go for another minute and 40 outbound. Now, if you're looking at the little map of it, you might think, oh, you're going miles out of it. Well, yeah, true. But as I come around the turn here, the wind is going to blow me towards the beacon big time. So I'm pretty happy that my current heading is probably going to be about right. I'm using about 40 degrees of wind correction. And you wouldn't use any more than about 40 degrees in an aircraft like this. You could probably go to 45 if you were flying a slower aeroplane, but with a twin, 40 degrees is about the maximum drift correction you want to use on the outbound leg of a hold. Now, if this was overlaid on this, I'd be looking for the gate position, which is when this is 30 degrees different, so to be over here on 300. Got a little way to go. Yeah, obviously we're aiming to be outside of where we normally would be on the hold, so the gate position is not a huge deal of use. For those of you familiar with the gate, are we still outside of cloud? We are pretty much. Minute and 20 gone, 20 more seconds to go on the outbound leg. Then we're going to turn inbound and see what's cracking. 150 is our 60 to go point, so at that point the ADF needle should be lined up exactly with the inbound. If it isn't, then we've got to make some kind of correction at a minute and 40. Let's go. Set our wind corrected inbound and see how we go. Yeah, I've got a feeling that we're going to have to intercept this by a bit over here. Yeah, okay, so let's try that. We've also got to descend, which is something I completely forgot about. So we're going to whack the autopilot off at this point. Where is it? There we go. And I'm going to hand fly and try to get us down a bit. Now, I've made a bit of a cock-up of that hold, to be perfectly honest. But hey, that's an example of what not to do. Okay, so beacon's dropping now, so we're now going to turn onto our outbound of 095. Change course to CDI to 095. This would be a lot easier with our HSI, which is a combined instrument with the overlay there. We're going to come all the way down to our 2,300 feet now. It would be a 50-knot wind when on the day where I decided to demonstrate this. Should have just done the DME arc. Bloody hell. Never mind. Okay, so keep the descent coming. I've already briefed the plate. Let's start before landing checks. So brakes pressurized undercarriage, defer. Mixtures set full rich. Mags are on both. Fuel's almost sufficient. Flaps defer. Instruments all set for the approach. Or are they? Because we don't have the QNH on there. Idiots. This is Birmingham. So this is a real no-no. Forgetting to set your altimeters. There we go. Okay, that's about right. So 2,300, don't bust through that. Silly boy, there we go. wonky flight director is not a particularly enjoyable thing to look at. Right, we're looking for 8 DME, we've got 6. We're pretty much on the track we want to be by the looks of things. So we're going to change to 264 on the course now. There's 8. Start the turn. And I'm now looking for the localizer bar to start moving. Let's assume we'll need an intercept angle of some sorts, given that we're going to be against the wind. The wind is trying to push us away from the localizer. Just gone through a bit of cloud, but it's fairly thin. I don't think we needed anti-icing for that. There we go. There's our intercepts. Heading there. Glide's alive. Well, glide is indicating anyway. It's not quite alive yet. And Loke's alive. It is coming in nice and slowly, as I expected, because we're fighting against the wind to try and pick this up now. Stupid boy. So this is what happens when you fly an aircraft with a G1000 cockpit that has a nice purple line that tells you what your CDI is set to. Obviously, we've completely flown through the localizer now. Because I had it on GPS still. Again, that's another thing not to do. We're coming down to 2,000 feet though now, looking for our top drop 5 miles, 7.8, so we've got a little bit of time to go, so we can still recover this. We're not completely screwed just yet. Wind's helping to blow us back onto the localizer, so thank you, wind. There's 2,000 feet. And it's almost on the loc now. We're actually visual with the runway out there in the distance, but we will fly the ILS. A little bit fast. I'm assuming gear and flap is going to slow us down enough that we won't actually need to change throttle settings all that much, but you never know. I did massively overcompensate for the wind on the hold, so perhaps I won't need such a huge amount of correction here. Glide's alive, so the glide bar has started moving. So, check your speed. Completely forgot what gear limiting of this airplane is. Down 129, right. Below 129, are we? Yeah, we are. Okay, so speed below 129, gear down. Gear down 3 green. Looking for half scale. Half scale we have, okay. Flaps 1. Okay, there we go. Top of drop, 5 miles. Down we come. That checks. Ground speed is 77 knots, so let's call it 80. So about 400 feet per minute we should be aiming for the rate of descent in the glide. Get rid of this off the screen now. So glide's looking good, slightly right on the localizer. Bringing that in. Surprisingly, the crosswind we've got from the right doesn't seem to be anywhere near as strong as I anticipated, or as the GPS is actually telling me. We've still got 40 knots. It looks like a quartering headwind, but it's probably mostly a headwind. A little bit fast, so I'm going to reduce power setting slightly. On the loco, on the glide, happy days. Drifting a little low now, so let's reduce our descent. Important not to overcompensate. It is getting a little bit rough now. If you notice you're getting a little bit low, don't sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater and drag the nose up and fly level or something, because you will sort of shoot back through the glide, especially the closer you get to the runway, the more sensitive it's going to become. Approaching 1,000 feet, there's no approach ban in force. We've got the runway visual now, we're just flying on instruments for the sake of training. Slightly low on the glides. Back the rate of descent off again. I think my trim is slightly out, which isn't helping matters. That's a bit better. Speed's looking good. Loke's still a little bit right. Glide's looking good now. Using a lot of rudder input to change heading. Try and keep the wings as level as possible. Exactly the same principle that you use flying a visual approach. Slightly high on the glide now. Pick up the rate of descent by a few hundred feet per minute and hold it there. Okay, looking good. Speed slightly high, reduce throttle very slightly. About 500 to go to DA, decision altitude. Slightly fast still on the speed. Watch that rate of descent, watch that rate of descent, a little bit high, pull it up. Real life, the Pappy and the ILS glide should agree with each other. Obviously here, they aren't. It's Microsoft Flight Sim. So there's decision altitude. We are visual. Okay, let's go. Speed below 110. Full flap. Reds, blues, and 3 greens checked. Let's try and fly her onto the ground using throttle. Oh, I'll take that. What a lovely aeroplane this is. Shame about the pilot. Keep an eye on the temperatures. We may want to pop the cowl flaps open. Or on the ground if we're expecting a relatively long taxi, or if it's a warm day. I mean, it's only 7 degrees outside, so overheating probably not the biggest concern right now. Okay, there we go. Mag switches. Fin strobe can come off. Alternators off. Panel lights are already off, and the battery master can come off as well. And let's pop the yoke back. And we can put our static elements on there. And pop the door open at the back. Let our hypothetical passengers out. There we go. Okay, so aeroplane performed very well, pilot less so. But I hope this was an interesting trip at least. It's a good little facsimile of the sort of trips that I do fairly often in real life, obviously with fewer mistakes in real life. But it's a good point to make. Unfamiliarity with an aircraft type can lead to all sorts of things like that. So that's why in real life we do check out flights. For example, if this little opportunity that I hope is going to happen comes through, I'm going to have a check-out flight of a few hours in the aircraft before they'll sort of let me off the leash, flying it around single pilot in instrument conditions. So probably needed a little bit of practice before I decided to record this video. But good point made by a bit of incompetence there. But yeah, thanks again for everybody tuning in to these videos and subscribing to the channel. I really hope you're finding something useful in them. Please leave any suggestions or comments below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, bye-bye.